Very good call yesterday with President Putin of Russia. Tremendous potential for a good/great relationship with Russia. Despite what you read and see in the fake news media, look how they've misled you on Russia collusion.
Free Talk Live.
Sarah, you're in New Mexico. Go ahead. You're on Free Talk Live.
Yes, I heard that hundreds of Russians are down in Venezuela. They're very much involved. That's what I was announced on the radio news, and I do believe it. But I'm thinking involved as in like military, army. Are they there too? I know that they gave. They have 2 nuclear war jets that they brought in, but they're very much involved. That was announced. So I do believe it.
Venezuela has been relatively cozy with Russia for many years, in the Soviet Union before that, so I guess it doesn't surprise me.
Well, but it's going to come down to like a war, like confrontation, like North Korea, like Korean War.
Oh, you think that the United States' involvement in Venezuela and then Russia's involvement, and then we're going to have some kind of proxy war?
Well, I mean, it sounds like it can happen.
Sounds like it could happen.
Yeah, I would say that's the case. Now, there's actually news about this. I'm glad you called in, Sarah, and thank you for the call tonight. Trump apparently had an hour-and-a-half long conversation with Putin about, at least among other things, Venezuela. And some people are mad about that. Sarah called in with a really interesting topic about the Russians in Venezuela, allegedly. The news media, however, reporting that Donald Trump had a lengthy phone call with Vladimir Putin yesterday and Vladimir Putin urged sanctions relief for North Korea and warned against interference in Venezuela, according to the Russian embassy. The call lasted for 1.5 hours, according to a post on the embassy's Facebook page. And the pair discussed a, quote, shared commitment to step up dialogue in various areas, including on issues of strategic stability. The spokesperson for the White House said the leader spoke for more than an hour. Trump tweeted about the chat for a second time on Saturday, that's today, saying there was, quote, well, let me read the whole thing. Here's his tweet. Quote, very good call yesterday with President Putin of Russia. Tremendous potential for a good/great relationship with Russia. Despite what you read and see in the fake news media, look how they've misled you on Russia collusion. The world can be a better and safer place. I
think that the news media, at least if I was to listen to MSNBC, would have me to believe that Donald Trump is cozy with Russia. So therefore, this shouldn't be surprising, I guess, a long conversation. I'm not sure exactly what I'm supposed to draw from this. I don't believe what I hear on MSNBC. Mm-hmm. And I find the idea of 2 guys with nuclear weapons as a possible solution to problems talking a good thing.
Absolutely, it's a good thing. In the same way that's
better than firing missiles.
Yes, in the same way that Trump talking with Kim Jong-un was a good thing. Unfortunately, the most recent meeting with Kim Jong-un was cut short early due to, I guess, Kim Jong-un feeling as though he was not being treated fairly by some in the U.S. government. And what's interesting about this position of Trump is it goes against people like John Bolton, who was just called in about in the last segment. We'll read a little bit more from this story on Trump meeting with Putin. Friday, Trump told, this is Bloomberg.com. Trump told reporters at the White House that Putin had assured him that Moscow isn't seeking to, quote, get involved, unquote, in the crisis in Venezuela, despite assertions by the U.S. president's top national security advisors that the Kremlin is offering critical support to Maduro's regime. So he's countering his own team, basically. He's going against people like John Bolton. Troops said of Putin...
I'm not sure I would trust Putin's word on something like that. I
wouldn't trust John Bolton's either.
Maduro's guy, I'm not saying I do.
Yep.
Maduro's guy is likely Putin, and then Trump has his guy that he'd like to see go in. So I'd say this is an issue that needs to be solved in Venezuela, not an issue that needs to be solved in Moscow or Washington, D.C.
Right, and it also doesn't need to be solved by Moscow or Washington, D.C. troops entering into Venezuela, which is, of course, what a lot of people are afraid is going to happen down there. And with people like John Bolton in charge of that sort of thing, it could very well, if he's indeed the warmongering scum that he's been presented as, and I suspect he is. But here's what Trump said about Putin. Quote, he's not looking at all to get involved in Venezuela other than he'd like to see something positive happen for Venezuela. And I feel the same way. The conversation, which Trump went on to describe as, quote, very positive, unquote, appeared to be another example of Trump taking Putin's claims at face value, despite contrary evidence from his own government. Spokesperson Sanders said on Friday that Trump simply was, quote, relaying what President Putin said to him. That's it, unquote. The White House National Security Advisor John Bolton and U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo both said, who's, by the way, I think former CIA, said earlier this week that the Kremlin talked Maduro out of leaving Venezuela after U.S.-backed opposition leader Juan Guaido attempted to end his regime by calling for a military uprising. In a video message posted Saturday on Twitter, Pompeo said that during an April visit to Cucuta in Colombia on the Venezuelan border, he had seen, quote, firsthand the misery that Maduro has created with the Russians' and Cubans' help. And then going on North Korea, the Russian embassy said Putin and Trump, quote, noted the importance of consistent progress towards denuclearization and achieving long-term normalization on the Korean peninsula because Putin had a meeting with Kim Jong-un recently. So I've had an article about that for a couple of weeks now. We just haven't had a chance. Just hasn't been on the top of my prep stack. But we've seen Kim Jong-un reaching out internationally to Donald Trump. Has had 2 meetings with Trump. There have been some really positive developments in North Korea as far as them stepping down the still ongoing but sort of demilitarized conflict, if you will. That's the war between South and North Korea. And so Putin briefed Trump about his meeting with Kim Jong-un. And then, let's see here, hours after their talk, North Korea fired numerous short-range projectiles off its eastern coast, according to South Korean authorities, a move seen as Kim's latest and most provocative signal of frustration over talks with Trump. And in that story about the Putin meeting with Kim Jong-un, let's see here, Kim criticized Washington. This is from apnews.com. Criticized Washington for taking a, quote, unilateral attitude in bad faith at the Trump-Kim meeting that has caused a diplomatic standstill, North Korean state-run news agency said recently. Kim told Putin that the situation on the Korean peninsula has reached a critical point where it could return to tensions and that peace and security will, quote, entirely depend on the U.S.'s future attitude. So Kim's playing a little bit of hardball here. He wants sanctions to be removed before he removes some of the nuclear capabilities that his country has. Is that an unreasonable position from his side of things?
I don't think it is. Sanctions don't do anything to world leaders. They do things to
the people,
the poorest of people in a given geographic area, and it's not gonna it's really not gonna to do much.
Free Talk Live. Listen live 7 to 10 p.m. Eastern or grab the podcast. It's all at freetalklive.com.